When Joe was rescued by me, he was on the verge of death. I spent all my savings to save him and took 3 jobs to nurse him back to health. But unexpectedly, I caught him in a place of debauchery, spending lavishly. It's hard on you, Joe. Living in a rundown rental house with a mute for a year. Prince, when are you going to tell that silly girl the truth? Joe laughed casually. What's the rush? I haven't had enough fun yet. Before he had enough fun, I disappeared from his world first. Later, when I was cured and said I do word by word at the wedding, Joe, in a state of distraction, rushed in with a diamond ring. Cece, I've come to marry you. From the slightly ajar box door, the coquettish laughter of girls came from time to time. I wiped the sweat on my forehead and held the heavy tray. Carefully freeing one hand, just as I was about to push the door open, I heard a very familiar male voice. You guys have fun. I should go back soon too. It was Joe's voice, as always careless, lazy and sexy. My fingers froze on the doorknob and couldn't move. Come on, Joe. Are you serious? It's so hard to come out once. What's wrong with having an all-night party? Joe seemed to chuckle. If I don't go back too late, she will worry about me. It's hard on you, Joe. Living in a rundown rental house with a mute for a year. Yes, Prince. When are you going to tell that silly girl the truth? Over there in Macau, the old man has urged you to go back several times. Joe laughed casually. What's the rush? I haven't had enough fun yet. What ability does that little mute have? How did she capture your heart? I slowly took a few steps back until my back was against the wall. Joe's voice was somewhat intermittent, although she can't speak, but she has a very pretty face. You haven't played this type before. You're so into it. Amid a burst of laughter, my whole body was ice cold and trembling, and my face was full of tears. When Joe returned to my rundown rental house, I had already fallen asleep. He came into the bedroom and walked very softly. He gently kissed me on the face before going to wash up. When he got into bed after taking a shower and held me in his arms as before, I almost couldn't hold back and shed tears again. Fortunately, I am a mute. Even if I cry, there is no sound. Cece, are you asleep? Joe's slightly cool lips were close to my ear, and his slender fingers rubbed me through the thin pajamas. I closed my eyes tightly, motionless, and tried my best to keep my breathing rhythm unchanged. Joe kissed me for a long time. Seemingly a bit dissatisfied, he sighed and then stopped. Just like every night when we slept close to each other, he buried his face on the side of my neck, pressed close to my body, and fell into a deep sleep. After he was sound asleep, I slowly opened my eyes, letting the tears that I had endured for a long time quietly well up. Joe was picked up by me when I came back from working the night shift. At that time, he was curled up beside the trash can under the dilapidated residential building, covered in blood. I spent all my meager savings and saved his life. And in order to let him recover as soon as possible, I took 3 jobs day and night. It took almost half a year for his body to fully recover. When Joe confessed to me half a year ago, I nodded through tears. I am an orphan and have no one to rely on in this world. Joe's appearance is like a gift from heaven to me. He is good-looking and extremely gentle and considerate to me. After he recovered, he forced me to quit my night shift job. He himself also went to work in a car repair shop and tried hard to support the family. But I was worried about him and always wanted to buy some expensive ingredients and tonics for him. So I secretly took a part-time job without telling him. But unexpectedly, when I was exhausted and working hard, he was in a place of debauchery, spending lavishly. It turns out that he is not a poor boy named Joe who is from a poor background like me. He is the prince in the mouths of those young masters. Joe. It turns out that this year is just his boring game. He hasn't had enough fun yet, so he hasn't left. When Joe woke up in the morning, I had already made breakfast in the kitchen. He casually wore loose pajama pants and walked to the kitchen to get water. While drinking water, he hugged my waist from behind. Wife, what did you make? It smells so good. As usual, I smiled at him and gestured with sign language to urge him to wash up and eat quickly. But Joe hugged me and wouldn't let go. Wife, I came back late last night after having dinner with my friends. Are you angry? I shook my head and told him in sign language, I'm not angry. I was going to wait for you last night, but I accidentally fell asleep. Joe picked me up and put me on the countertop and kissed me, then compensate me for last night now. I couldn't help blushing. I dodged my eyes and didn't dare to look at him. His needs are always extremely strong. After we were together, except for my menstrual period, he would want me almost every night. I am introverted and shy. Even though we have had a sexual relationship for half a year, I still can't let go between the sheets. But Joe is very naughty. He always hooks me to pose in embarrassing postures and messes around day and night. But I love him and don't want to disappoint him. So I have never refused him. It's the same this time. Next week is my 21st birthday. It is also the first birthday after I am with Joe. It is also the first time in 21 years that someone celebrates my birthday for me. I made a decision in my heart. After my birthday is over, I will leave him. Leave him forever. The kitchen was in a mess. The fried eggs were burnt, and the milk was almost boiled dry. I couldn't make a sound, but I was almost bitten my lips because of the torment of lust. Joe hugged me, who was sweating all over, and gasped heavily in my ear. Wife, do you know how deadly you were just now? Joe kissed me again and again. There was a smile in his eyes and a gentle look. When he kissed me, it was as if I was really the treasure in his palm. I closed my eyes and raised my face to respond to him. Another affectionate moment. When our love was at its strongest, Joe called my name in my ear, Cece, I love you. I shed tears in my heart. Joe, is it true that people who act always have a moment? Forget that they are acting, forget that they are deceiving. On my birthday, neither Joe nor I went to work. I deliberately wore that skirt that I had never worn before. The underwear inside was also bought for me by Joe, but I would never wear it and show it to him. In the small and humble living room. With the lights off, only the candles on the cake were lit. Joe seriously put on a birthday hat for me, sang a birthday song for me, and taught me how to make a wish in my heart. Cece, remember to make 3 wishes. Joe looked at me with a smile and reached out to help me fix my hair. He was wearing a simple white shirt and black trousers. But such inexpensive clothes still couldn't hide his noble air when worn on him. In fact, I am too stupid. I should have seen it a long time ago. How could a person like him be just a poor vagabond boy, as he said? I smiled at him, clasped my hands and closed my eyes gently to make a wish. May Joe and Cece never meet again in this life and the next life. I straddled Joe. I specially permed my long hair in the afternoon. Put on very beautiful makeup. That skirt is a thin-strapped, very tight-fitting long fishtail skirt. Joe's eyes looking at me were unprecedentedly hot and burning. Cece, Cece. He looked up and kissed me. His long fingers hooked the thin shoulder straps and pulled them down inch by inch gently. I also rarely responded actively. The makeup on my face was already messy. The tear stains at the end of my eyes dried and got wet and dried again. I don't know how many times. Cece, say you love me. Joe leaned down and kissed me forcefully and domineeringly. Cece, say you love me. I held his hand and pressed it against my hot and burning heart. At the moment when the tears fell, my heartstrings suddenly broke. Cece, Joe's eyes gradually became blurred. I knew it was the sleeping pill that took effect. Why can't I see your face clearly anymore, wife? Joe murmured softly, raised his hand and wanted to touch my face, but his hand hung down limply. His eyes closed and he fell into a deep sleep. Joe was in a deep sleep. I took out the suitcase that had already been packed and stood by the bed, looking at him for the last time. He always looks very well behaved when he is asleep. His soft hair covered his forehead, and his eyebrows and eyes were pitch black. I looked at him seriously for a very long time. Then, I turned around, pulled the suitcase and walked out of the bedroom, passing through the very small living room and reaching the doorway. This is the house where I have lived for 5 years. It's a very rundown rental house, but I have made it very warm. Looking around for the last time, I felt reluctant. But more of it was resoluteness. I opened the door, walked out, and didn't look back. When Joe woke up in the morning, he only felt his mouth was dry and his head was splitting. He habitually reached out to his side, but only felt emptiness. He didn't care. Cece should be in the kitchen now. Wife, pour me a glass of water. I'm dying of thirst. Joe lay on the bed with his eyes closed, pressed his throbbing temple, and shouted towards the door. There was still silence outside. Joe shouted again. After waiting for a moment, Cece still didn't come in. Joe slowly opened his eyes. He got out of bed and walked out of the bedroom and went to the kitchen first. But there was no one in the kitchen. The cooking utensils were cold. There were no traces of use and no prepared breakfast. Joe only felt his heart sinking continuously. He quickly turned around and walked towards the bathroom. Cece, are you in there? The bathroom door was ajar. He pushed it open, and it was still empty inside. The rental house is so small. There was no Cece anywhere. Joe felt his heart beating violently. He went back to the bedroom, took his mobile phone and dialed Cece's number. But suddenly, he saw that at the simple wardrobe on one side, Cece's suitcase was gone, and so were Cece's clothes. Joe was stunned for a moment. Soon he came to his senses. His face was still as calm as ever. He opened the drawer. Sure enough, Cece's certificate was not inside. He sat on the bed, took out a cigarette box and lit a cigarette. After smoking one cigarette, as if thinking of something, he suddenly chuckled. Then, he grabbed that cheap mobile phone and slammed it hard on the ground. I went to a small county thousands of miles away. After being abandoned at birth, I lived in a children's welfare home here for 6 years. Until later, I was adopted by a couple who couldn't have children. In the first few years after being adopted, my adoptive parents treated me fairly well. But as their own child was born, my days became more and more difficult. Later, because of an illness, I suddenly couldn't speak and was abandoned by them. In those years, I wandered around, was briefly adopted, and was abandoned again and again. But I still grew up stumbling along. I don't have any special skills. I just can endure hardships and am very dexterous. Before, Joe often said that my cooking skills were so superb that I could become a chef. He also said that I had spoiled his stomach. So he would never be able to leave me in this life. Now thinking of these words, I only feel ridiculous and sad. There is still the aunt director in the welfare home. She took me in and gave me a job. Prepare daily meals for the 30 children here. I like this job very much. Although it is really very busy. But it's good to be busy. When I am busy, I simply don't have time to think about Joe anymore. In the second week after coming to the welfare home, Joe found this place. At that time, I was busy in the kitchen. My hair was casually tied into a bun. I was wearing a very large apron and waterproof rubber shoes. But Joe was completely different from before. He leaned against the car and smoked. He was wearing a black coat with a whole set of seemingly very expensive suits inside. His hair was also newly cut. It was very neat and stylish and suited him well. Even his temperament had changed. When I looked at him from a distance, I only felt strange. It was the kind of strangeness and estrangement that couldn't be melted like winter ice. The children were lying by the gate, looking at him curiously. His expression was a bit cold. There seemed to be a hint of impatience between his eyebrows. Without tidying up, I walked towards him dressed like this. When Joe saw me, he subconsciously stubbed out his cigarette. The sunlight near noon in early winter sifted down through the gaps in the treetops. Countless golden spots swayed lightly in front of him. And he was standing in that patch of gold, extremely handsome. Cece, Joe called my name. His voice was a bit hoarse. I looked at him and smiled gently. Then, I stood still 2 steps away in front of him. Greeted him with sign language, Mr. Rong, hello. Joe didn't speak. He just looked at me quietly. He was a little thinner, and there was also a very faint tiredness in his eyes. I moved my gaze away from his face. Mr. Rong, do you have something to do with me? Joe suddenly chuckled. Cece. He took a step towards me, looked down at me, and his voice was low and gentle. I came to take you home. Home? Go back to what home? Go back to which home, that run-down rental house? I once fantasized about saving some money and discussing with the landlord to buy that small house as the home for me and Joe. We only have one child and give all our love to him. But in the end, all of this became an illusion. Probably only such a stupid and naive dream will be made once in this lifetime. I shook my head. You go. Don't come looking for me anymore. Joe took another step towards me. This time, I took a step back. He tried to hold my hand, but I put my hand behind my back. Joe's hand was frozen in midair like that. I saw the simple silver ring on his middle finger. It was so out of place with him now. I reached out and tried to take off that ring. But Joe suddenly clenched his hand tightly. Cece, there is no reason to take back something that has been given away. I felt something slowly pierce into my heart. That kind of pain was dull but sharp, making my eyes sting and my vision blur. I trembled my fingers and gestured to him, then throw it away. Don't wear it anymore. It doesn't deserve you. Don't come looking for me anymore. We broke up. We broke up, Joe. After I finished gesturing, I turned around and was about to leave. But Joe tightly grasped my wrist. He didn't speak. He just pulled off the apron on my body and the sleeve covers on my sleeves with a cold face. Then, he dragged me towards his car. I couldn't break free. I simply lowered my head and bit hard on his hand. At the moment Joe let go, there was anger on his face. Cece. I looked at him calmly, but my movements became faster and faster. Joe, where are you taking me? That rundown rental house? Or your home in Hong Kong City? What are you taking me back for? Will you marry me? Marry a mute, an orphan, a person as insignificant as a weed? Or let me be your secret lover? Mr. Rong, you are the Prince of Macau. I can't afford to provoke you. Don't force me anymore. Cece, I will make it up to you well. I will be good to you. Joe raised his hand to wipe away the blood on the back of his hand. Suppressing his anger, his voice had already become gentle. I shook my head again, but I don't love you. Cece. There was an incredulous anger in Joe's voice. The person I loved died on the day I picked him up. I looked at him and smiled with tears falling down. Cece. Give me another chance. I wiped away my tears and pointed my finger at my heart. That person is extremely good in my heart. He is the best man in the world. And you are not. Don't make me hate you more, Mr. Rong. Joe's last look at me was extremely cold. He said, Cece, I came to find you only because of our past affection. Now I only ask you one last time. Will you come back with me? I still shook my head. Joe didn't stay any longer. He turned around, got in the car and left. Joe stayed in this small town for 3 days. I heard that on the night before he left, suddenly many luxury cars with different license plates from other places came to the small town. It seemed that many bodyguards were also dispatched. The next day, Joe left quietly. I know very well that with his background and being such a proud young master, how could he tolerate my repeated rejections? Perhaps, by condescending to come and find me this time. For him, it can be considered as giving me enough face and a way out. But I don't know what's good for me. Facing the ladder to success, I am unwilling to take a step up. The dignified prince has been humiliated. Not killing me can be considered as being nostalgic. Joe left. I just pretend he has never been here. Just live my own small life peacefully. The person who often comes to the welfare home to deliver daily necessities is a young man named Lin. When he was a child, he had polio and one of his legs was thus disabled. Therefore, even at nearly 30 years old, he still hasn't found a wife. Another aunt in the welfare home quietly told me that Lin likes me. Slowly, the neighbors around began to talk quietly. Even Lin's mother came to the welfare home several times. Every time she saw me, she would hold my hand and talk with a smile. It seems that in the eyes of the world, a mute like me is just right for a cripple like Lin. I don't dislike Lin. He looks honest and reliable, and he is also practical and capable. I just don't like him. To be exact, it is impossible to like any man anymore. Lin wrote me a love letter. After thinking for a long time, I still replied and rejected him. He was depressed for a few days and didn't come to deliver goods to the welfare home. It wasn't until it snowed in winter that he appeared again. But he was much quieter, and the smile on his face was gone. As the new year approaches, one night, a child in the welfare home suddenly had a high fever. After my aunt and I sent the child to the hospital, my aunt told me to go back and rest. Come and take over the next day. But on the way back, a small accident happened. When those two men held me at knife point, looking at the lights in the windows of people not far away, I couldn't even make a sound to call for help. Lynn appeared at that time. He saved me, but with one leg disabled, he couldn't run away at all. The man with the knife stabbed Lynn in the chaos. The blood splashed on the snow, shocking. At that moment, my throat actually let out a hoarse, rough and unpleasant screech. The neighbors nearby heard the commotion and opened the door and came out. The assailant who hurt people threw Lynn on the snow and fled. I staggered to Lynn's side and knelt on the snow. Lynn. He covered his lower abdomen in pain. Blood gushed out from between his fingers. The man who was in so much pain that he was about to faint still managed to smile at me. Cece, don't be afraid. I won't die. Lynn didn't die, but this stab was too deep. His body was severely damaged and very weak. It wasn't until spring was about to come that he barely recovered by half. Everyone thinks that I must marry him to repay such kindness. Lynn's mother came to see me and cried. She said that the doctor told her that Lynn's injury was in the lower abdomen and it was very likely to affect his fertility in the future. He was already having a hard time getting married. With this, even fewer girls would be willing to marry him. After Lynn's mother left, I hid in my room alone and cried for a very long time. That ordinary and cheap silver ring hidden deep in the bottom of my suitcase. In the end, I threw it away with my own hands. However, after such a long time, I thought of Joe again disappointingly, thinking of those words he said when he put this ring on me. Cece, from now on, you are mine, my wife. Joe had a slightly naughty smile. At the beginning, I always didn't dare to look at him and didn't dare to look into his eyes. And he often deliberately teased me, Cece, are you still shy looking at your own husband? Then in the future, when we sleep on the same bed, will you be so shy that you faint? I blushed and covered his mouth to prevent him from continuing. In the end, I don't know who kissed whom first. Anyway, that night, Joe didn't sleep on the broken sofa in the living room anymore. He was extremely pushy and moved into the master bedroom and slept on my small bed. That night, he completely possessed me. When I was in pain and shedding tears, his eyes were red with distress. He kissed me and comforted me over and over again. He said he would be good to me all his life and love me all his life. He said that he had no way to repay the kindness of saving his life and could only repay with his body. He would only have me as a woman in his life. But in the end, I understood that it was all false. What saving a life can only be repaid with one's body. It's just a clumsy excuse for a dandy young master to deceive body and heart. But I believed it. So Joe, saving a life can only be repaid with one's body, right? You taught me this. So Joe, now I can only marry Lynn, right? Joe was lazily leaning on the sofa, with a cigarette between his fingers. But it took a long time before he casually put it to his mouth and took a puff. All the other young masters in the box were hugging a young and beautiful girl. Only by Joe, no girl dared to get close to him. Someone pushed the door and came in. It was Kiki who had the closest relationship with Joe. As soon as he entered the door, he came up to Joe. Look at your absent-minded look every day. Why, are you still thinking about that little mute? Joe didn't speak. He just gave Kiki a cold look, stubbed out his cigarette and poured wine again. Kiki then smiled slyly and snapped his fingers at the door. A thin and small girl walked in with her head down. Kiki got up and pushed the person to Joe's side. Look, isn't she 5 points similar to your little mute? Joe's hand holding the wine glass slowly paused. He looked up at the girl in front of him. The girl was also looking at him shyly. Hello, Mr. Rong. I'm Cece. Listen, even the names are similar. It can be considered fate, right? Kiki pushed the girl in front of Joe. A thin and small figure, a small face the size of a palm. Not the kind of stunning appearance at first glance. With thin eyebrows and eyes, but very charming. In fact, if we really compare, she is even a few points more beautiful than Cece. But Joe only took one look and then looked away. Get out. Kiki was stunned for a moment. Joe. Joe put the wine glass heavily on the table. Don't make me say it a second time. Get out. Kiki could only wave his hand and let the person out. He also poured a glass of wine and clinked glasses with Joe. Knowing that you are uncomfortable. Not only did she refuse to go back to Macau with you, but now she is going to get married. Who is going to get married? Joe asked in a cold voice, but the corner of his mouth was tightened into a line. Kiki smiled and drank half of the wine in his glass. Who else could it be? The little mute who has been with you for almost a year. Impossible. Why is it impossible? I heard that the wedding will be held next week. Kiki stared at Joe and watched the expression on his face. Could it be that she won't get married for the rest of her life? Joe laughed and drank up the wine in his glass in one gulp. She is mine. She has already married me. You want to marry her? Joe, think about your identity. What identity do I have? If she hadn't saved me that day, I would have died long ago. What identity would I have if I were dead? Kiki was silent for a moment. But you clearly said that day that you just hadn't had enough fun. Joe put down the wine glass and leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. Yes, I just haven't had enough fun. So, she can't marry someone else. Kiki laughed. Joe, you are clearly moved. Joe was silent. He didn't admit it, but he didn't deny it either. What Kiki said is actually right. Every day after returning to Macau, as long as he is free, he can't help thinking of her. He misses that rundown rental house and her small bed. He misses the clean and fragrant bed sheet she washed and the soft quilt she aired. He misses every meal she cooked for him with care. He misses her who obediently nestles in his arms every night. He never knew that every minute and every second of that year, he would remember it so clearly. The famous ladies in Macau are beautiful and elegant. Each one is 100 times better than Cece. But he can't even muster up the slightest interest and doesn't want to look at them at all. The ring that Cece put on him, he has been reluctant to take it off. He promised her that when they had their wedding, he would definitely give her a diamond ring. The diamond should be at least 1 carat. That silly girl's eyes widened in shock at that time. She gestured eagerly in sign language, telling him, a 1 carat diamond is so expensive. I don't want a diamond. Don't waste your money on buying me a ring. We should save the money to buy a small house. When we have a baby in the future, we must have a home of our own. Thinking of this, Joe suddenly smiled. He could now afford to give her countless diamonds. But Cece wouldn't want him anymore. Cece was getting married. She would look at another man tenderly and shyly in the future. She would sleep in the same bed with that man. She would let him kiss her, make love to her, and have children for him. Suddenly, Joe stood up, kicked the table in front of him aside, and walked out. Kiki also stood up, but he didn't stop him. Actually, he had long sensed that Joe had only that little mute girl in his heart and couldn't fit anyone else in. He walked out and saw his sister standing not far away in the corridor. Her eyes were terribly red. She must have just been crying. Kiki walked over and said, "You saw it with your own eyes tonight, right? There's simply no room for other women in his heart. Don't be silly. Even if you force him to marry you by using the pressure from the elders, you won't be happy in this lifetime." Kiki ruffled his sister's hair and said, "Rather than becoming a miserable couple and ruining my friendship with him, it's better for you to give up on your own now. At least, with so many years of friendship, Joe will still take care of you in the future. But I've liked him since I was a little girl. But he already has someone he likes in his heart. You're so smart. You'll figure it out, right? Is she really that nice? Brother, what kind of woman is she?" Kiki thought for a moment. He had only seen Cece from a distance a few times. She seemed to be a quiet and shy girl. But he remembered clearly that in front of Cece, Joe was relaxed and casual. He didn't even seem like the air carefully cultivated by the Joe family in Macau City anymore. Just like every ordinary man deeply in love in this world. At that time, Kiki could only think of one description. My wedding with Lynn was extremely simple, even shabby. Lynn was injured and had spent a lot of money on medical treatment. So from the very beginning, I said that everything should be kept simple. The wedding gowns of both of us were the cheapest ones rented. The wedding venue was in the empty courtyard of the welfare home. Lynn's suit didn't fit him well, and my wedding dress was a bit yellowish. The one who did my makeup was a cousin of Lynn's. Before the wedding even started, my makeup had already smudged a bit. Lynn limped around greeting the guests, sweating all over his head and face, but he was extremely happy. Looking at his simple and honest smiling face, I unconsciously curved the corners of my mouth too. In life, 8 or 9 out of 10 things are unsatisfactory. If I could settle down like this, it didn't seem too bad. The wedding was about to start. Lynn's cousin helped me touch up my makeup again. Looking at myself with the clumsy makeup in the mirror, I thought dazedly, Cece, you're about to get married. Marrying a man you don't like but who is honest and down to earth. Look at you, even your smile seems bitter. On the shabby stage, Lynn and I stood facing each other. The master of ceremonies with a clumsy Mandarin accent loudly announced for the bride and groom to take their vows. Lynn looked at me with a red face and said, I do. I looked at him. But what came to my mind was the way he was covered in blood that night. Now I could say some short sentences. I didn't need to gesture in sign language to tell the other person that I was willing anymore. Cece, are you willing to marry Lynn and become his bride, staying with him through thick and thin for a lifetime? Lynn looked at me nervously, waiting for my answer. I opened my mouth. My throat felt a bit sticky. My voice was hoarse and trembling, but it was clear. I do. The moment I finished speaking, Lynn let out a huge sigh of relief. The groom can now kiss the bride. The master of ceremonies said with a smile. Lynn's whole face turned red, and he stammered and asked me, Cece, can I? I was just about to nod when suddenly there was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone turned around to look at the entrance. 21 Joe got out of the car, looking travel-worn. He walked through the crowd and quickly reached the shabby stage. Cece, he was holding a diamond ring in his hand, a very large one, shining brightly. It was really beautiful. Any girl would be tempted to see it. But in my eyes and in my heart, it could never compare to that cheap silver ring. Cece, I've come to marry you. Joe handed the diamond ring to me. His eyes were a bit red, and his face looked extremely tired and haggard. I looked at him calmly. Lynn was also looking at him nervously and on guard, tightly gripping my hand. Perhaps it was because he was too tired from preparing for the wedding these days. Lynn's disabled leg had been shaking all the time. I crouched down, straightened the cuffs of his pants for him, and helped him walk to the side to sit down. You take a rest for a while. Cece. Lynn held onto my hand and wouldn't let go. With difficulty, I said, I'll handle this. Lynn's hand slowly loosened. I smiled at him and then turned around and walked back to Joe. But before I could say anything, Lynn's mother suddenly walked over. Cece, let's forget about this marriage. Anyway, you haven't got the marriage certificate yet. She smiled a bit awkwardly. Besides, Lynn is injured. He doesn't deserve you originally. Mom, what are you talking about? The wedding between me and Cece is almost over. Lynn immediately stood up anxiously, but his mother had already walked onto the stage and reached him. She whispered something to Lynn, and suddenly Lynn became quiet. She then pulled Lynn hard. Let's go. There's 2 million yuan. Lynn stared at me for a while, but still followed his mother and left. Suddenly, I understood everything. Joe? I softly called his name. This was the name I had recited countless times in my heart. Cece, I told you. I'll marry you. Joe walked up to me step by step and tightly grasped my wrist. Go and change your clothes. Come home with me, Cece. Why? Cece. Joe patiently coaxed gently, you come back with me first. I'll explain it to you. I kept shaking my head, desperately trying to pull my hand back. But Joe was too strong. I couldn't break free at all. He held my hand like this, walked through the crowd, and reached the car. So many people were watching, but none of them reached out to help me. The car door was locked. Joe ordered the driver in a deep voice, to the airport. I started crying, screaming, and hitting him, but Joe remained unmoved. When I bit his hand hard again, he finally said, "Cece, don't waste your energy." He looked at me. It was the same face, the same eyes. But there was no longer the gentle and clean smile in those eyes. There was only the overbearing possessiveness of a person who was confident of getting what he wanted. Suddenly, all my strength drained away. The car sped forward. I just sat there in a daze, looking at the street scenes flashing by outside the window. Joe wiped the blood on his hand and handed me a bottle of warm milk. My throat was hurting badly, as if it was congested and torn. "Your throat is uncomfortable. Drink some." Numbly, I took the milk and drank half of it. But soon, sleepiness swept over me. I tried hard to open my eyes, but I couldn't muster any strength. Joe pulled me into his arms. "Cece, go to sleep. When you wake up, we'll be home." In my last bit of consciousness, there was a very light kiss from Joe that landed on my forehead. The huge manor was shrouded in a heavy rainstorm. And in the pouring rain like a waterfall, there was a tall and slender figure kneeling in the rain, motionless like a mountain. The heavy rain continued until midnight, and that person knelt there until midnight. The old man standing by the window finally let out a helpless sigh and ordered the people beside him, "Go and ask someone to help the seventh young master in." The person beside him smiled bitterly and said, "Master, you know the temperament of the seventh young master." The old man angrily pounded his cane. "He knows that I love him and can't bear to see him suffer, so he deliberately puts on this act of self-torture to show me. That's also because the seventh young master has been close to you since he was a child. That's why he dares to play this trick of self-torture, isn't it?" Seeing that the old man was a bit moved in his expression, the person beside him continued, "When the seventh young master was born, the first wife passed away. He has been raised in front of you since he was a baby. In this world, who could love him more than you?" Hearing this, the old man felt sad. "Of course I love him. It's precisely because I love him that I can't agree to what he wants. But the seventh young master, isn't he just like you? In terms of being affectionate and loyal, isn't he exactly the same as you?" This sentence clearly touched a nerve with the old man. He couldn't help but think of his deceased wife. Their backgrounds were also vastly different, but back then, hadn't he used every means to insist on marrying her into the family? However, the girl that Xiao-Qi liked was really. Whenever the old man thought of the girl's family background and personal history, he got a headache. How could the future mistress of the Zhou family be a mute? Moreover, with that timid and cowardly temperament, how could she command respect and handle important occasions? "I've met that girl. She seems like a nice girl. Besides, she can already talk now. With proper treatment, it won't be long before she's just like a normal person." You know how difficult the path ahead is for Xiao-Qi. I'm old. How many more years can I protect him? The current head of the Zhou family is Zhou's father, Liu. But Zhou's mother died not long after giving birth. Less than half a year later, Liu remarried his first love. Along with that woman, a son and a daughter also entered the family. According to seniority, they are ranked third, that is, the current third young master of the Zhou family. More than a year ago, when Zhou had an accident, it was the work of this third young master. Unfortunately, he is Liu's most beloved son. Liu is also notoriously partial. If it weren't for the intervention of the old man, who had been ill for a long time, that third young master Jason would probably have gotten away scot-free. But the old man's health was getting worse day by day. He was worried about the powerless Zhou and wanted him to marry Adeline, the daughter of the Kiki family, to gain more support. But this stubborn Zhou refused to do so, insisting on marrying a mute. Seventh young master is no ordinary person. Didn't you also fight your way out alone when you were young? When you're old, you can't help but feel sorry for your children and grandchildren, just wanting them to suffer less. Seventh young master isn't the kind of person who would rely on a woman to get ahead. Why should you damage the relationship between you as grandfather and grandson? Besides, you don't know. Now, even if seventh young master insists on marrying her, it's useless. That girl has made up her mind not to marry him. Suddenly, the old man became interested. That girl refuses to marry? Xiaoqi has been thwarted by her. More than that. Since he brought her back, it's been almost 2 weeks, and he hasn't even been able to enter her room. Serves him right. The old man couldn't help but laugh too, this little brat. Finally, there's someone who can put him in his place. He's been a little devil since he was a kid. It's a good thing that someone can dampen his arrogance. 23 Joe had been a bit irritable these days. Cece locked herself in the room and refused to see him. She only ate one meal at noon every day, and the servants would bring it upstairs and leave it outside the door. If Joe even took one step onto the second floor, Cece wouldn't touch the food at all. At first, he didn't believe it and insisted on going upstairs. Sure enough, Cece didn't eat or drink for the whole day. Joe felt so sorry for her that he had to compromise. Every day, he would come downstairs and stay for a while, carefully asking the servants about Cece's recent situation before leaving reluctantly. But an accident happened on this day when he was leaving. Joe's car was being tailed. Midway, the other party suddenly accelerated recklessly and rammed into his car. Actually, Joe and his subordinates had already noticed something was wrong and had several opportunities to avoid the danger in advance. But Joe refused the suggestions. Even when the SUV went crazy and rushed over, he ordered the driver to suddenly slow down, turn around, and then accelerate and crash head-on into it. People have a survival instinct in critical moments, even if the other party is a desperado. But this sudden change obviously disrupted the other party's rhythm. They subconsciously slammed on the brakes. The two cars collided, and the SUV was sent rolling. The front of Joe's Hummer was also severely damaged. Everyone in the car was injured to varying degrees, and Joe was also wounded, with blood all over his face and body. He was rushed to the hospital urgently. 24 When I heard the news, Joe had already been out of danger. But his condition was still not very optimistic. It was said that Joe was extremely uncooperative with the doctor's treatment. With his noble status and arrogant and unruly temperament, the doctors and nurses in the hospital and the people around him didn't dare to persuade or interfere too much. In the end, the matter even reached the old man. But this time, even the old man's personal intervention was useless. Several of Joe's wounds showed signs of infection, and he began to have intermittent high fevers. If this continued, even an iron body wouldn't be able to withstand it. I was holding a water glass, standing in front of the water dispenser, when I heard the servants whispering behind me. I heard that 7th young master fainted twice again today from the fever. The doctor gave him an infusion, but he pulled out the infusion needle as soon as he woke up. The old man was furious in the hospital, but it was completely useless. 7th young master just wouldn't listen. What are we going to do if this continues? How can anyone endure a persistent fever? I gradually became dazed and couldn't help but think of the time when I picked Joe up. It seemed to be the same back then. He was covered in wounds and had repeated high fevers. Yet he was stubborn and refused to listen to the doctor obediently. I could only stay by his side day and night, coaxing him not to touch the needles randomly. Later, when he was discharged from the hospital, I fell seriously ill. Actually, I could guess that this time, it was probably another act of self-torture on his part. He wanted to make me feel sorry for him and return to his side. But I couldn't get over that hurdle. Whenever I thought of that sentence, "What's the hurry? I haven't had enough fun yet," I felt an unbearable pain. It was like a thorn stuck in my heart and flesh, and it would probably be impossible to pull it out in my lifetime. I just pretended I hadn't heard anything, drank some water, and silently went back to my room. 25 The old man came to see me in person. He hoped that I could go to the hospital to see Joe and persuade him to accept the treatment properly. But I knew that I couldn't be soft-hearted. One step of compromise would lead to continuous compromises. I didn't want to reconcile with Joe or return to his side. This wasn't what I wanted. And what I wanted, Joe could never give me. After all, in his lifetime, it was probably impossible for him to love me as much as I loved him. I don't know what he did to make you resist him so much, but Cece, you saved his life. You don't want to see him die like this, do you? Sitting opposite the old man, I suddenly burst into tears. He was born without a mother, and his father favored other children. He was raised in front of me since he was a baby. I truly love him. Cece, I know you're a kind-hearted good girl. You don't want to see me, at my age, having to send a young person to the grave, do you? Joe looks like a pampered young master, but only I, this old man, know how hard his life has been. The time you saved him, it was his half-brother, the third young master, who did it. This time, it's still that bastard. I was quite surprised and couldn't help but ask, doesn't Mr. Roan care? After all, Joe is his own son, the only child left by his first wife. The old man shook his head with a cold laugh. He favors the third son. He's disliked Joe since he was a kid. Don't say that Joe was lucky enough to survive. Even if he had died, he wouldn't have been willing to touch his son. I couldn't understand that there could be such a father in the world. But on second thought, I was abandoned at birth just because I was a girl. So what was there that I couldn't understand? It turned out that Joe and I were both pitiful people with weak family ties. Please let me think about it, okay? The old man didn't force me. Not long after he left, the servant told me that Joe's friend Kiki had come. 26 Joe, and the three young masters from the He and Moo families grew up together since we were kids. We had the best relationship. But a few days ago, the young master of the Moo family died of drowning while snorkeling. Miss Cece, do you know why? I shook my head. Kiki smiled bitterly. The accident that happened to Joe more than a year ago was because he colluded with Joe's third young master behind his back. Because Joe didn't suspect him, he was almost killed by the plot. I couldn't help but be extremely shocked. If the pain of losing one's mother and being disliked by one's father are tragedies that one can't choose, then being betrayed by one's best friend who grew up together must be even more painful for Joe. We finally got news of Joe and found him. The person from the Moo family also came along. At that time, I hadn't got any solid evidence yet. I had an agreement with Joe that we shouldn't alert the enemy for the time being, so I was as close to him as usual. But since Joe already knew that he had betrayed him, he was extremely wary of him in his heart. Only then did Kiki look at me. That night when we were drinking together, that guy surnamed Moo deliberately asked about you several times. Joe also said those things on purpose. He didn't want to involve you. He didn't want them to think that you were very important to him. After all, his situation was really tough at that time. I raised my head in astonishment and looked at Kiki in disbelief. After a while, I asked in a trembling voice, why didn't Joe explain all this to me? Kiki shook her head with a wry smile. Miss Cece, you don't know Joe's temperament. He has been proud since he was a child and is extremely rebellious. It's almost impossible for him to explain, bow his head and admit defeat. Even the old man can't do anything about him. But it wasn't like that. During the nearly 1 year of getting along with him, Joe was gentle and considerate to me. He never made me angry. Even if we had a quarrel occasionally, he would soon come to apologize to me. He felt guilty towards you. And since you hated and resented him so much, he was even less willing to explain. This time when he was injured and hospitalized, actually Joe did it on purpose. Miss Cece, he just wanted to know if you would still feel sorry for him like before. If you really remained indifferent and could just watch him die, then he would give up. 27 Actually, I had always wanted to ask Joe a question. If I hadn't overheard their conversation and chosen to leave without a word back then, would he have continued to keep it from me and deceive me? Then one day when he got tired of it, would he turn around and go back to Macau City and never come back? Or would he choose to find a suitable opportunity to confess to me and let me choose to let go by myself? I know the weaknesses of human nature. Because I was the one who let go first, Joe would feel aggrieved and unwilling. I also knew very well that I was ordinary and mediocre. Joe's world was colorful and exciting. He wouldn't like only me for his whole life. But what I wanted was always wholeheartedness from the beginning to the end. 28 I went to the hospital to see Joe. He had several festering and inflamed wounds on his body and was still running a fever. His lips were chapped and peeling, and there was blood oozing from the cracks. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was haggard, and his cheeks were sunken because he had lost so much weight. I poured some warm water and fed it to him, and then asked the doctor to clean his wounds and give him an intravenous infusion. He was silent but didn't refuse again. "When you get better, let's have a good talk. I have something to say to you." I tucked the quilt for him and was about to get up. Suddenly, Joe said, "Honey." He raised his hand with some difficulty and moved his swollen fingers. The silver ring was still on his swollen middle finger. He refused to let the doctor take it off. My eyes felt a bit sore. It had been like this from the very beginning. He knew best how to make me soft-hearted. "Take it off first. It must be very uncomfortable like this. The doctor said it has to be cut off, but I can't bear it." "Cut it off." I lowered my eyes and looked at his horribly swollen hand. Finally, "I couldn't bear it, I'll buy you an identical one. Cece, you won't leave me again, will you?" Joe's eyes were full of hope and a surprise that he dared not show. But my heart was in a daze. I know that Joe has countless ways to make me stay. And I can't deny that I still love him. I don't know what the future will be like. But for now, Joe and I are bound to be entangled with each other. I didn't answer him. I called the nurse to come and cut off the ring. After he fell asleep, I left the hospital. Until Joe was discharged from the hospital, I didn't go to see him. And after he was discharged, he came to find me immediately. No one knew what we talked about that afternoon. Just heard the servants say privately that when the seventh young master left, he looked distracted and seemed to be in a state of utter dejection. 29 This is the third year I've stayed in Macau City. It's also the second year I've been Joe's wife. He kept his promise. He didn't hold a wedding with me and didn't take me back to the old house of the Joe family. He never made public the marital relationship between us. And I never showed up publicly in Macau City either. I seldom stepped out of this huge and beautiful house. All my spare time was spent on planting flowers and grass and studying recipes. Gradually, Kiki and those people, as well as the old man, all became regular visitors here. Joe came here every day, but I only let him stay overnight at most twice a month. Even so, I got pregnant. At that time, Joe's third elder brother was accidentally disabled. The old man knew that he didn't have much time left, so he gave everything under his name to Joe. Leo was paralyzed in bed due to a stroke half a year ago. Since then, the Joe family has been Joe's domain. When Joe learned that I was pregnant, his joy was beyond words and couldn't be concealed at all. He held my hand tightly and hugged me, refusing to let go. "Cece, when the baby is born, let's hold a wedding. He's my first child. He can't just appear in front of the world without a clear identity." Yes, in the whole Macau City, except for those close to Joe, no one knew that he already had a wife. 2 years ago, there were many people who wanted to form an alliance with the Joe family through marriage. But after being severely reprimanded by Joe, no one dared to mention it again. I lowered my eyes and smiled faintly. "I don't like weddings." There was obvious disappointment in Joe's eyes, but he still forced a smile. "If you don't like it, then we won't hold it. When it comes to the baby's full moon banquet, Cece, you can't not attend, can you? Just hold it if you want." "Cece?" "Joe, I'm a bit tired." Okay. Then you rest. I won't disturb you. I'll be downstairs. Call me when you wake up." I watched him stand up, thoughtfully covered me with the thin quilt, and left the room reluctantly. My heart was also sour and uncomfortable. I know that I love him, but I can only love him like this. Children who have never received love since childhood have a strong sense of self-help and defense. Once bitten by a snake, one is afraid of well ropes for 10 years. I just don't want to be abandoned again. 30 I gave birth to a beautiful daughter for Joe. He liked her so much that he could hardly put her down. The full moon banquet of our daughter caused a sensation in the whole Macau City. People outside were all guessing which woman could have given birth to a child for Joe. But on the day of the full moon banquet, Joe wore his wedding ring and announced that he had got married 2 years ago. I love my wife very much. It's just that she doesn't like to show up in public and doesn't like the hustle and bustle. I respect my wife's wishes and have never made this public. My wife's health is not good. She has been recuperating since giving birth to our daughter. Joe looked at the camera, his face calm yet gentle. So, Xiaoqiao will be my only daughter, my only child. When I saw this video, I was not without surprise. In wealthy and powerful families, they attach great importance to descendants and believe in having more children for more blessings. But Joe said that Xiaoqiao was his only child. I couldn't help thinking of the little accident that happened on the day of my delivery. Adeline told me that I was semi-conscious in the operating room at that time. When Joe signed the risk notice, his whole body was shaking so much that he could hardly hold the pen. I couldn't help crying. When Joe came back and saw that I had cried, he was almost scared to death. "Cece, are you not feeling well?" He held my hand tightly. His fingers were cold and trembling continuously. I looked at him and finally asked, "If I hadn't left without saying goodbye back then and hadn't married Lynn, would you still have been so obsessed and insisted on getting me back?" Joe hugged me, his forehead against mine. Our daughter was sucking her fingers on the small bed beside us, looking cute and quiet. "Do you know that on your birthday, I originally wanted to confess to you and take you back to Macau City?" I shed tears silently. Actually, now that these words are said, it doesn't matter whether they are true or false. Maybe he had thought about it. Maybe he was sincere to me. Maybe he really liked me and wanted to marry me. But no one can understand or experience the mood I had that night when I heard him say those words with my own ears. Even later, when I knew that he had said those things on purpose and that they weren't his true words. But the pain, despair, and breakdown back then were real and deeply engraved. It's like a child who carefully built a crude castle with stones and wooden strips. But it was kicked down by an adult. Even if they later told him, "It's okay. We were just joking with you. Look, actually we had already prepared a more beautiful building block castle to give you." But there was no way to make up for it anymore. The sadness of watching the castle collapse with one's own eyes at that moment. I don't know if this is being overly sentimental or complaining without a cause. But I really felt sorry for myself that night when the whole world collapsed in front of my eyes. "Cece, I know what you're afraid of and worried about." Joe gently wiped my tears. "I'll bear the consequences of my own sins. I deserve it. But our whole life is still long. I believe that one day, you'll accept me again like you did that year. What if you can't wait? Joe, will you regret wasting your whole life on someone like me? Only when I die will I really know whether I regret it or not." Joe bowed his head and kissed me. "Cece, I only know now that I remember every word and every promise I said to you. I'll only have you as my woman, only you as my wife for my whole life. Is it worth it? Joe? If it's willingly done, it's worth it." Joe hugged me again. The smile in his eyes was gentle yet firm. "Cece, we still have a whole life. I can wait." Suddenly, our daughter whined and cried twice. I quickly pushed Joe away and wanted to pick her up. Joe let me lie down and skillfully picked up our daughter, changed her diaper, and coaxed her to sleep. Our daughter fell asleep in his arms. I also fell asleep on the bed. In my dream, it seemed that I went back to that year again. He was just a poor wandering guy named Joe. I was just a mute orphan girl busy running around for a living. But we loved each other very much. In that parallel time and space, Joe was always Joe from the beginning to the end. I was also mute from the beginning to the end. We got married and bought that small rented house. We gave birth to a daughter who looked exactly like me. Joe loved her, but he loved me more. Every day when he came back from work, he would bring 2 small snacks or 2 flowers. The small one was for our daughter, and the large one was for me. We were affectionate for our whole life. We never left each other for a day. I was crying in my sleep. That was the life I wanted most in my life. But I know that it will never be possible again.